Hi, I'm Jason Wirgau, and we're sitting here with Mr. Gary Reid, MSU professor and general manager of the Impact Student Radio here at MSU. Gary, if we could jump back to how long have you been in the Lansing community, and how did you get started in the audio and music industry?
Well, coming up in high school, I was what we would now call a professional musician. Back in the day, I didn't think it was a big deal, and this is in the mid to late '60s, and so essentially, I came at this whole audio, radio, media industry from a musical background. I just was very, very fortunate that my private teacher happened to be the lead percussionist for the Detroit Symphony.
So your first job was promotions, mixing?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, my first real job, and ironically, I took a pay cut from a musician's pay to become a faculty member. So that, if that gives you an idea what where that kind of lays out. But my first real job was as a professional musician. When I got up to Lansing, because I'd had so much experience early on in the recording studio, and I always had an interest in electronics and so on. I started to do a lot of radio work, working out at WFMK and a number of other stations. Worked at WKAR here as an audio engineer, WKAR television, and ultimately the predecessor of the Impact, which was the campus radio system as well. So likewise, I was doing a lot of live mixing at a number of clubs in town, and back in those days we actually brought in on a routine basis nationally known live blues, jazz, rock, pop artists.
That's what I was going to get to. Who are some of the big names that you could talk about? I've heard a story about Muddy Waters and you, if you could elaborate on that, if you could.
Muddy Waters, well-known blues artist, and I was very familiar with his material. Came in, I was very excited to do the show. So we came in, and in those days we did two shows. We did an 8 p.m. show and a 10 p.m. show. And I got there probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we did the load in and the setup and the checkout and sound check. Everything was fine. It was great. I was really up for it. And we did the first show. It went off perfectly. It was great. I was having a good time. And on a mixing console, whenever you're working, when you get it all dialed in, you don't go messing with it. I just basically put a check mark on the master fader and brought it down. Have the intermission, have the break, bring it back, master fader right back to where it was. All the musicians were up on stage, Muddy was there, everything was cool. But right off from the first song, he wasn't happy. He hated something was going on, and he'd be giving me, turn me up, turn me down, etc. And I couldn't figure this out. I said, it's where it was, but he was complaining about it. And it just got worse and worse. And so he'd finish a song. He said, "Hey man, give me more of this, give me more of that," And so each song got progressively more and more out of control. And so I was moving faders and saying, this doesn't make any sense to me, but that's what he's wanting. That's what the artist is telling me that he wants. And so finally, it got to the point where he stopped in the middle of the song. And he's like, "Hey man, if you can't get this together, I'm not going to go on with the show." Well, of course, by now, I've shrunk from 5'10". I'm about 2 feet tall. Looking over the top of the console, everybody in the audience is pissed off, and So how can this be? I'm just flabbergasted. Well, make a very long story short, what it amounted to is they were playing poker during the break, and the band cleaned them out. And so no matter what we had done in the first set, didn't matter. He was just plain mad.
Let's shift a little forward now. Let's get from the 70s into the 80s and the Impact, which is turning 20, I think the 24th of February, I believe. Now we're going from analog to digital. And can you talk about where the radio has gone over the last 30 years with that?
The changes have been enormous from analog to digital. The equipment that we use today is radically different than what we started with. Some of the stuff is the same, Some of it remains, but in large measure the digital delivery systems, the touch screens that we use today, the recording techniques and production techniques are all completely different.
Now turning to HD signals and satellites coming, where do you see the impact in 10 years from now, say 10, 15 years from now?
Boy, that's a great question. To be honest, as the general manager here, I try to work on 5-year plans. And so we're completing our fourth 5-year plan from my perspective. 5 years ago, we had decided to move into the then new aspect of HD radio, digital broadcast. There's about 14,000 radio stations in the country. We were number 132 to go digital. Our fifth 5-year plan that I'm looking at is to expand our digital broadcast into our HD2 channel, or probably HD3 at some point. So what the idea is that we'll be increasing our programming, in many cases our non-music oriented program, more talk and lecture oriented and so on, that will be running on our HD2 channel in the hopes that we can provide a better service to more people around the Lansing area simply by using the technology that's available to us now.
We've been talking with Mr. Gary Reid, MSc professor and general manager of the Impact. I want to thank him, and happy birthday to the Impact.